Hello everybody, this is Gregory of 5-Minute Catholic Apologetics and Living, where 5 minutes of your time may get you to the divine. Today we're going to talk about the different rites in the Catholic Church and how there is a rite there waiting for you if you don't like your particular parish that you're at currently. Now before we begin, let's start with a prayer. Nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritui Sancti. Amen. Gloria Patri et Filii et Spiritui Sancti, sicut erat in principio et nunc et semper, et secula seculorum. Amen. All right, so a lot of Catholics and certainly a lot of Protestants don't understand that we have different rites in the Catholic Church. Now, this is R-I-T-E, by the way. And a rite is not a schismatic break-off group or a autonomous church per se in the Catholic Church. The best way to look at a rite is an extension of a regional difference in liturgy and in language. Remember that the church started in the Near East, of course, in the Holy Land, and it spread in vastly different directions. North, south, east, west. St. Mark allegedly was martyred in Alexandria. We know St. Thomas historically went to India. And then we know, probably most famously, St. Paul and others who went to the west, St. Peter, for example. And so in the early histories of the church, or the early centuries of the church, you saw, because they didn't have the telegraph and they certainly didn't have internet, that different cultural customs developed within these churches in vastly different regions of the known world. Now, they all celebrated the Mass. They all celebrated because we could see the Mass played out in 1 Corinthians. We know that the Mass was done by the early church. In fact, the Mass was being done even before the New Testament in its entirety. All 27 books were written, and certainly by the time they were canonized. So the Mass was going on, but again, why would they be doing Latin in Armenia when Armenia was barely even at the greatest time of Pax Romana under Roman rule? And certainly it wouldn't be done in Latin down in India. So these differences developed mostly based out of language and culture, and they've always remained. And some of these rites, and aside from the Latin rite, which is the main rite, when a person thinks of the Catholic Church, they typically think of the Latin rite. Not necessarily because they hear Latin being done at the Mass. It's just the Latin rite is the rite that you see from Rome west. And so since the Latin rite predominated, pretty much if you look at the Rhine River and then the Danube, it's kind of the demarcation. Well, I would say the Rhine River up to the Alps and down toward kind of present-day Slovenia. Everything to the east of that was not going to be a Latin rite as a whole, and everything to the right of that or west of that would be Latin rite. And since the countries of exploration were Latin rite, France, England before the schismatic Henry VIII broke it off, Spain, Portugal, were all Latin rite, that is the rite that went to the New World and pretty much all over the world. So the majority of Catholics that you know of, the preponderance, are Latin rite. Now we know 1970 the Novus Ordo Mass was rolled out. Prior to that, the Masses were all done in Latin, in the Latin rite. And then after that, the Church, in its wisdom, decided to have the vernacular done. So if you're in Portugal, you'll hear it in Portuguese. If you're in France, you'll hear it in French. If you're in America, you'll hear it in English, and so forth. But we're all Latin rite. Now there are some branches of the Latin rite. I think most notably, and this canonically, I probably would not be defining this. A canon lawyer will correct me, but think of the ordinariate of the Chair of St. Peter. This is a national diocese, for lack of a better word, of former Anglican churches that decided to come back to Holy Mother Church. These were typically high church Anglicans whose liturgy was very similar to the Catholic liturgy. And the whole parish decided to come back. And so you find these, as I mentioned before, I attend one in Texas, and there's several within North America. And so that would be kind of a rite, but it's not an official rite. So they are in the Latin rite, and there's some other ones we're not going to talk about. Aside from the Latin rite, which is the predominant rite in the Catholic world, you have 23 other rites. And the majority of these we're not going to mention, but I want to break them into 6 major groups, because these major groups are pretty much done by language and liturgy. But within the 23 rites, you have 6 major groups. So the The largest of these groups is going to be the Constantinopolitan, otherwise known as the Greek Rite. And within the Greek Rite, you're going to find liturgies that are almost identical to what we would call the Orthodox, the Russian Orthodox and so forth. Their liturgies are very similar. Both the Orthodox and the Catholic Eastern Rite, Greek or Constantinopolitan rites, got their liturgy from two great 4th century saints, St. Basil and then St. John Chrysostom. We have a video here on the influence of St. John Chrysostom, and that's one of his lasting legacies, was developing this liturgy. So out of the 6 major groups, the Greek or Constantinopolitan would be the major one. What else do you have? You have the Alexandrian Rite. That's mostly going to be out of Alexandria, Egypt. So that's going to be probably most famous, the Coptics. Now the Coptics, some of them did leave the church and they were schismatics, similar to the Orthodox, and some of them came back to Holy Mother Church and are under the Bishop of Rome or the Pope. So you have the Coptics there. You have the Armenians. That's another major rite. That's going to be mostly out of Armenia. You have the Antagones, or the is more commonly known as the Maronite Rite. They're going to be headquartered out of Lebanon. Love Lebanon because I love their food. Love Middle Eastern food, Near East food. So they're going to be another one. Then you have the Chaldean Rite. The Chaldean Rite, unfortunately, has been so persecuted the last several decades. They're mostly headquartered out of Iraq. And at one point, the Diocese of Baghdad was the largest Catholic Christian diocese. I mean, the two words go hand in hand because there were obviously no Protestants at the time, and Catholics were the original Christians. But the largest Christian diocese at one point was the one out of Baghdad. Think about, before the rise of Islam in the 7th century, you have 700 years where, once Christianity spread there in the early church, you have at least 300-400 years of there being a Christian Catholic presence in the fertile valley of Mesopotamia, where Iraq is currently today. Now, of course, after so many centuries, and really due to a lot of persecution in the most recent 100 years, there's not a lot of Chaldean Christians. A lot of them have been persecuted to the point of being almost wiped out, and then a lot of these people have actually emigrated to Europe and to America. But you definitely have them as well. And then you have, those are the 5 main ones. So you have the Alexandrian, which are going to be mostly the Coptics. You're going to have the Antagones or the Maronites. You're going to have the Armenians, the Chaldeans out of Iraq, and then the Constantinopolitan or the Greek ones. And again, within them, they're different. The 23 other rites. But those are the 5 main groups. You have Latin, and then these 5 groups, and then under these 5 groups, you have these things like that. And the last thing I want to mention is, for those of you who, look, I have the playlist of liturgical abuses that drive me crazy, rightfully are frustrated with some of the abuses that we've seen in the Novus Ordo liturgy since 1970, and you're tempted to go to the Orthodox, the Greek and Russian Orthodox or Serbian Orthodox, or ROCOR, Russian Orthodox abroad, over here in the States. Just understand, we have these rites, these groups. So, for example, the Greek Rite, the Constantinopolitan Rite, most large cities have several of these, and they're Catholic, they're not schismatic, and if you go to their liturgy, you're going to like their liturgy. All of these rites as a whole, and I don't want to paint large swaths of generalizations here, but as a whole, these 5 other large groups of these rites have a very reverential and solemn Mass. Very reverential and solemn. So understand, if you're frustrated because of a lot of the Mass issues, for lack of a better word, and some of the social issues that you see being played out, the cultural wars in the Catholic Church, a lot of people think that the solution is going to the Orthodox, Russian, Greek, whatever. But understand, and we have a video here, 7 reasons why Trad shouldn't go Orthodox, is you're not escaping a lot of those social cultural wars. They're over there. They're dealing with the same stuff. Plus, the main thing I would tell you is they don't have unity within the Orthodox because they left the church. At least 1,000 years ago, they left the church, and they fight amongst themselves, these autonomous Orthodox churches, because again, once you leave Peter, what happens? Break off of a break off of a break off of a break off, factionalism, strife, and so forth. So if you're tempted, you see the Orthodox schismatics as some sort of a temptation because they have a good mass. And don't get me wrong, they have a great mass. They have apostolic succession. They have 7 valid sacraments, all these things like that. John Paul II, the Orthodox said, are one of the 2 lungs of the church. Just understand, like, before you go that way and become a schismatic, make a little stop in your Catholic Byzantine parish or your Catholic Maronite parishes, because these are Catholic. They're under the Bishop of Rome, they're under the Pope, they're loyal to the Pope, and so you're not dealing with the schismatic part of it, the disobedience part of it. Yes, I know Orthodox, you're listening, you're going to say you're not disobedient. I totally understand that. Post in the comments. We can do a live stream on it if you want. But I feel you're getting the best of both worlds because you're still staying with Holy Mother Church, and you're getting, I guess you could argue, a better liturgy than what you might be getting in Our Lady of Suburbia parish, wherever you are now. So if you live in a large city, you're kind of disenchanted with your parish, understand by canon law, you are not beholden to stay at that parish. So if you have a TLM, a Latin Mass, if you have an ordinariate of the Chair of St. Peter, if you have a priestly fraternity of St. Peter, if you have any of these, try those out, even if the drive is long. And if you don't have these, or maybe you do go church shopping, so to speak, and go to one of these Eastern rites of the Catholic faith, and you like one of these parishes, by canon law, you are more than welcome to go there. So consider going there. Guys, post in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, take care. God bless and pray.